Hey, I'm Rachel. My alarm hums at precisely 6 a.m., a low vibration under my pillow. I silence it with one practiced swipe before the second buzz. The bedroom smells faintly of lavender from the diffuser I set last night, 4 drops, no more, no less. Clint is still sprawled on his side, one arm dangling over the edge, his chest rising and falling in the unhurried rhythm I envy. In the bathroom, my skincare lineup gleams like soldiers ready for inspection. Cleanser, toner, serum, moisturizer, sunscreen. Each one a small ritual in control, in carving out order before the chaos of the day. By the time I finish my coffee, French press, 2 scoops of grounds, 200-degree water, Clint stumbles in. His hair sticks up at odd angles, and he grins at me, unbothered by the world. "Morning, soldier," he says, nudging my hip as he reaches for a mug. His is mismatched, a chipped blue thing we picked up at a farmer's market last year. I almost threw it out once, but Clint caught me. "It's got character," he'd said. I didn't understand then. We met at a gallery opening 3 years ago. I remember the exact moment. He stood near a modernist sculpture, one hand in his pocket, head tilted like he was trying to unravel its secrets. His shirt sleeves were rolled to his elbows, revealing strong forearms dusted with freckles. I wasn't looking for anyone that night, I'd gone for networking, but something about his quiet confidence drew me in. He noticed me hovering and introduced himself with an easy smile. "Clint McAllister, architect." Our conversation flowed like water over smooth stones, effortless and grounding. He sketched me on a cocktail napkin, right there, while I spoke about a merger I'd been working on. By the end of the night, his number was saved in my phone under Napkin Artist. From the start, our differences felt complementary. I thrived on structure, Clint reveled in possibility. I color-coded our schedules while he left room for detours. He'd show up 15 minutes late to a dinner reservation, shrugging off my pointed looks with a kiss and a promise of dessert. It infuriated me, but I convinced myself it was a charming quirk, something we'd smooth out with time. Even our home reflects our contrasts. The living room, with its minimalist furniture and monochromatic palette, is my sanctuary. But Clint's touch is everywhere: crooked photo frames, vibrant throw pillows, a hand-carved bowl he insists is functional despite its wobble. "It's art," he says. I rearrange it when he's not looking. I told myself these were minor things, easy compromises in the grand scheme of a relationship. But sometimes, compromise feels like a slow erosion, like water wearing down stone. The first crack appeared when he redesigned our patio. I'd envisioned clean lines and symmetrical planters, something straight out of Architectural Digest. Clint had other ideas. His sketches, full of curves and asymmetry, looked chaotic to me. "It's organic," he explained, as if that made it better. I couldn't stop myself. I redrew it while he was at work. He found the revised plans on the dining table that evening. His silence stretched, heavy and suffocating, until he finally said, "Rachel, it's a patio, not a courtroom." I laughed, but it stung. Now, as I watch him pour coffee, sloshing milk to the brim of his mug, I wonder if I ignored too much. If I mistook his easygoing nature for adaptability, or if he mistook my precision for rigidity. "You're thinking too hard," he says, breaking into my thoughts. He leans on the counter, his smile soft around the edges. "Force of habit." He steps closer, pressing a quick kiss to my temple. "Relax, Ratch. Not everything needs a plan. But plans are how I survive. Without them, the world feels like quicksand." I grab my laptop bag and keys, sidestepping his outstretched arm. "Don't forget your lunch," I say over my shoulder. "Wouldn't dream of it." His voice is warm, teasing, as I shut the door behind me. Outside, the city hums with purpose. The air is crisp, the kind of morning that promises productivity. I let myself believe, for now, that the fractures in our relationship are small, surface level. Manageable. But even as I settle into my office chair, flipping open my planner to a neatly itemized to-do list, I feel it, a quiet, insistent doubt. Clint and I have always walked parallel paths, his winding, mine straight. I thought they'd converge with time, but lately, I wonder if they're diverging instead, pulling us in opposite directions. The first year of marriage felt like a long exhale after holding my breath for too long. Clint and I fell into an easy rhythm, our differences balancing more than clashing. I thought we'd worked out the kinks during the years we lived together before tying the knot. I'd come to accept his tendency to leave jackets draped over chairs and shoes scattered near the door. He, in turn, tolerated my endless need to reorganize the pantry every Saturday morning. But marriage is different. Marriage is waking up every day with someone else's habits invading your space. It's folding towels one way only to have them stuffed into the linen closet another. It's Clint's idea of cleaning up being stacking everything in piles, random, precarious piles, and calling it done. At first, I laughed about it. Organized chaos, he'd say, grinning, as if the phrase excused the mess. But over time, those piles began to feel like evidence. Evidence that Clint didn't care enough to learn the systems I'd carefully put in place. Evidence that my standards didn't matter. By the time I noticed the strain, it had already seeped into the cracks between us. It showed up in small, passive-aggressive moments. Like when I reminded Clint to load the dishwasher before bed and woke to dishes stacked in the sink. Didn't get to it, he'd mumble, already halfway through his coffee. Or when he forgot to water the monstera I'd spent months nurturing, its leaves curling in protest. Plants bounce back, he said, shrugging off my glare. We were both busy, busier than we'd been before the wedding. I was gunning for partner at the firm, clocking 12-hour days and spending my evenings reviewing contracts. Clint had landed a career-defining project, a sleek waterfront museum that had him pulling late nights at the office. Our schedules barely overlapped, and when they did, we were often too tired to do more than trade updates about work. Still, I tried to keep things running smoothly at home. I drafted grocery lists, scheduled vet appointments, and restocked the fridge without needing to be asked. I'd spent years building a life where control equaled calm, and I wasn't about to let it unravel. But Clint's version of helping made my skin crawl. He'd unload half the groceries and leave the bags on the counter. He'd fold laundry into lumpy squares that didn't fit neatly into the drawers. When I asked him to wipe down the counters, he missed the crumbs that clung to the edges. It's fine, he said once, catching me mid-sigh as I refold a stack of shirts. It's not fine, I snapped. It's careless. He blinked, surprised, and for a moment, I saw something flicker behind his eyes. Frustration. Resentment. But he didn't say anything. He didn't have to. The real trouble began when I realized how differently we approach stress. I leaned into control, doubling down on routines and plans. Clint, on the other hand, withdrew. He'd disappear into his studio for hours, sketching or scrolling through playlists, completely unreachable. It felt like abandonment. One evening, I came home to find the trash overflowing and Clint lounging on the couch, beer in hand. My day had been a marathon of meetings, each one more frustrating than the last, and the sight of him so relaxed while the house sat in chaos tipped something inside me. Why can't you take 5 minutes to handle this? I snapped, kicking the trash can for emphasis. Clint looked at me, his jaw tightening. Because I didn't see it, Rachel. I don't catalog every little thing like you do. It's not cataloging, I shot back. It's basic responsibility. He stood, slow and deliberate, his voice low. Do you even hear yourself? It's a trash can, not a moral failure. I didn't reply. Instead, I grabbed the trash bag and stormed out to the curb, the night air biting at my cheeks. When I came back, Clint had retreated to the studio, the door closed behind him. These arguments became routine, a loop we couldn't break. Clint's deadlines loomed closer, and my partner evaluation felt like a boulder perched above me, ready to fall. Neither of us acknowledged the tension outright, but it leaked into everything. One Saturday morning, I found myself rewashing the dishes Clint had cleaned the night before. As I scrubbed, harder than necessary, I heard him shuffle into the kitchen. "Morning," he said, his voice tentative. "Morning." I didn't look up. He lingered by the counter, the silence between us heavy. Finally, he spoke. "I don't think this is working." My stomach twisted, but I kept scrubbing. "What isn't working?" "This," he said, gesturing vaguely. "The way we operate." I turned to face him, the sponge dripping water onto the floor. "What are you saying, Clint?" "I'm saying," he ran a hand through his hair. "I feel like I can't breathe in this house." The words hit me harder than I expected. I opened my mouth to argue, to defend myself, but nothing came out. Clint shook his head, grabbed his jacket, and left. For the first time, I stood in the silence of our home and wondered if maybe Clint wasn't the only one suffocating. It's always something small that sets off the big things. A single thread pulled, unraveling everything you worked so hard to keep together. For us, it was laundry. I had spent most of Sunday morning catching up on house chores. Clint was out picking up groceries, his idea of helping, which usually meant half the list forgotten and random snacks I hadn't approved. When he walked through the door, whistling, I was in our bedroom organizing my folded clothes into neat stacks. Shirts by color. Pants by season. "Where do you want these?" he called, holding up the bags as I stepped into the hallway. "In the kitchen," I said. "I'll put them away after I finish this." He disappeared, but not before dropping a bag too close to the edge of the counter. I heard it tip, a box of cereal tumbling to the floor. I forced myself to breathe, to let it go. It wasn't worth starting something. Not today. But when I returned to the bedroom, I saw it. His clothes. Dumped in the middle of the bed, crumpled like discarded paper. I stared, the heat rising in my chest. I'd asked him, told him not to mix his laundry with mine. His system, if you could call it that, was to grab everything, whites and colors alike, and shove it into the machine. No sorting, no thought. "Clint!" My voice carried through the house. He appeared in the doorway a few seconds later, a bag of chips in hand, already open. "What?" he asked, as if the mess before us wasn't obvious. I gestured to the bed. "What is this? Laundry?" He crunched a chip and shrugged. "Why is it on my side? Why didn't you fold it?" "I figured you'd fold yours, and I'd fold mine later." The casual tone was gasoline on an open flame. "That's not the point. You didn't respect the system." "The system?" He frowned. "Rachel, their clothes. Not a stock portfolio. It's about respect." I snapped, my voice sharp enough to cut. He set the chips down, his expression hardening. "Respect? You're talking about respect over socks and t-shirts?" "It's not about the clothes," I said, though it was exactly about the clothes. It was about everything. The dishes. The trash. The piles of clutter he left like breadcrumbs in every room. "Then what is it about?" he demanded, arms crossed. "It's about you not caring how hard I work to keep this house in order." His jaw tightened. "Maybe because your idea of order is suffocating." There it was again, that word. Suffocating. It slammed into me, ripping through the thin veneer of control I'd been holding onto. "You think I'm the problem?" I asked, my voice shaking. "You think I'm the one who's making this impossible?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned against the doorframe, staring at me like I was a puzzle missing a piece. "I think," he said slowly, "you can't handle anything that isn't exactly the way you want it." I laughed, but it came out sharp and humorless. "And you can't handle doing anything the right way." "The right way?" Or your way. What's the difference? That did it. He pushed off the doorframe, his hands clenching into fists at his sides, though he kept his voice calm, maddeningly calm. The difference is you don't see me, Rachel. You see a project. Something to fix, to mold, to control. And I'm done being controlled. For a moment, I couldn't speak. The air between us buzzed with everything unsaid. I wanted to scream, to tell him he was wrong. But deep down, part of me wondered if he was right. You've been miserable, he said, his voice softer now. You think I don't notice? You think I don't see how tightly you're wound every second of every day? I swallowed hard. I'm not miserable. Yes, you are, he said simply. And you're making us both miserable. The words hung there, heavy and undeniable. So what now? I asked, my arms crossed tightly over my chest. He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. I don't know. I can't do this, though. Not like this. I stared at him, my throat tight. You're saying you want out? I'm saying I need space, he said. To think. To breathe. The silence stretched between us, thick and unbearable. Finally, he grabbed his keys off the dresser. I'll stay in the guest room, he said, his voice flat. For now. And just like that, he was gone, leaving me standing in the middle of our bedroom, surrounded by unfolded laundry and unanswered questions. The guest room door stays shut most nights. I hear Clint moving around in there, drawers opening, the soft creak of the bed frame, but we barely speak. The silence feels like a third presence in the house, filling every corner, heavy and unyielding. At work, I keep up appearances. I smile in meetings, review contracts, and hit every deadline. But at home, I sit in the quiet, staring at the life we've built, wondering where it all went wrong. One night, after pouring myself a second glass of wine, I called Dr. Martinez. She'd helped me years ago, during a rough patch at work. I think I'm losing my marriage, I say when she picks up. Her voice is calm, steady. Come in tomorrow, she says. The next afternoon, I sit across from her in the familiar leather chair. I recount the fight, the silence, the growing distance between us. Rachel, she says gently, when did you start needing everything to be perfect? I blink at her, taken aback. I don't need everything to be perfect. I just like things done well. Done well or done your way? Her words echo Clint's, and it stings. It's not about control, I insist. She raises an eyebrow, saying nothing. In the quiet that follows, a memory surfaces. My parents fighting in the kitchen. My mother yelling about money while my father stormed out the door. I remember cleaning up after them, stacking dishes, organizing papers, folding blankets, because it was the only thing I could control. I guess. I've always needed things to feel manageable, I admit, my voice barely above a whisper. Control can feel like safety, Dr. Martinez says. But it can also create distance. Especially with someone who thrives on spontaneity, like Clint. That night, I sit in our bedroom and look around. Everything is in its place, books lined up by height, throw pillows perfectly angled. It's exactly how I want it. But it feels empty. I notice Clint's sketchbook on the dresser. He usually keeps it with him, but I guess he left it behind in the shuffle. I hesitate, then open it. The pages are chaotic, smudged charcoal, ink bleeding into the edges, sketches that feel alive and raw. There's a drawing of me in there, my hair loose, my face soft in a way I barely recognize. I close the book, my chest tight. He sees me, even when I don't see myself. The next morning, I knock on the guest room door. Clint looks surprised to see me, his sketchbook in hand. These are beautiful, I say, holding it out to him. He takes it, his expression unreadable. Thanks. I hesitate, then sit on the edge of the bed. I don't want this to be the end, I say quietly. But I think I need to figure out how to let go. For the first time in days, he looks at me. Really looks at me. I want that too, he says. It's a start. Small, but real. Clint and I start small. Little gestures, tentative steps towards something new. He leaves his coffee mug in the sink instead of rinsing it. I don't say anything, though I feel the urge to. Instead, I try to remind myself it's not a declaration of war on cleanliness. It's a mug. One evening, I fold laundry on the couch while Clint sketches at the dining table. When he joins me, he picks up a shirt and folds it in his typical, haphazard way. I watch the uneven edges, the crooked sleeves. Not bad, I say, smiling slightly. He smirks. High praise. We laugh, and it feels like breathing fresh air after being underwater too long. Communication comes next, halting and awkward but necessary. I tell him about Dr. Martinez, about the memories of my parents that shaped my need for control. He shares his frustration with feeling dismissed, boxed into my version of right. It wasn't that I didn't care, he says one night, leaning against the counter as we cook dinner. I just wanted space to do things my way. I nod, letting his words settle. I see that now. We test our newfound balance with small tasks, grocery lists, meal prep, even rearranging the living room furniture. The sofa ends up slightly off-center, a compromise between his preference for open space and my love of symmetry. The real test comes when we decide to host a dinner party. My old instincts kick in immediately: menu planning, spotless cleaning, arranging place settings down to the angle of the forks. Clint gently pulls me back. Let's keep it simple, he says. People don't care if the napkins match. I let him take the lead, resisting the urge to intervene when he throws together a charcuterie board with mismatched cheeses and unevenly cut bread. When guests arrive, I notice they're more interested in the laughter and conversation than the food arrangement. By the end of the night, I realize I didn't even notice the crooked napkins. The next morning, we lounge in bed longer than usual, sipping coffee and reading. The sunlight streams through the windows, highlighting the mess we left in the kitchen. It doesn't bother me as much as it used to. Clint sets his mug on the nightstand, crooked and off-center. I glance at it, then leave it where it is. Perfection, I think, isn't in the details. It's in the balance, the space we've created between order and chaos, structure and freedom. For the first time, it feels like enough.